The camera pans across a peaceful suburban street, the golden light of morning glistening off freshly washed cars and trimmed hedges. A moving van idles at the curb, birds chirp. Everything looks picture perfect until you hear her voice. "You can't move in there. That house belongs to the HOA." I froze, one hand on my front door key, the other gripping a box labeled kitchen. Standing across the driveway, sunglasses, clipboard, and fury blazing like wildfire, was the HOA president, Margaret Fuller. And right behind her, a locksmith. "Ma'am," I said, forcing a calm smile. "This is my house. I have the deed." She smirked. "Not anymore." That's when I heard it click. She'd already changed my locks. I didn't know it yet, but this was the beginning of a battle that would end with blue lights flashing, neighbors filming, and a woman forced to unlock my door in front of everyone. When I bought 143 Maple Ridge, I thought I was escaping city noise, chaos, and landlords who didn't care. A quiet home near the lake, a place to start fresh after my divorce. I'd signed the papers, paid cash, and moved in on a Friday morning. But before my boxes were even off the truck, Margaret the self-appointed queen of the HOA marched across the yard like she owned it. "Excuse me," she shouted, heels stabbing the gravel. "This property belongs to Maple Ridge HOA. You can't move in without board approval." Her tone had the kind of confidence that made new neighbors freeze. But I wasn't some pushover. I showed her my paperwork, the deed, stamped by the county, the map, clearly showing my home outside the HOA boundary by 42 feet. She didn't even look. Maps can be wrong. She snapped. "You're not on the HOA roster, which means you're trespassing on association property." I laughed. "Big mistake." Her face turned crimson. She yanked out her phone, speed, dialed someone, and hissed into the receiver. "Yeah, bring the locksmith, now." Within minutes, a white van pulled up. A man hopped out, tools in hand. "Hey, hold on." I shouted, jogging to the porch. "You can't just—" "I can and I will," she said, crossing her arms. "Until this matter is cleared, this house is under HOA hold." She actually said that under HOA hold. I filmed the whole thing. The locksmith hesitated, but when Margaret barked, "Do it," he started unscrewing my lock. I called 911. "Hi," I said, trying to keep calm. "There's a woman changing my locks on my property." "Sir, are you sure it's your property?" the dispatcher asked. I laughed bitterly. "Ma'am, I have the deed in my hand." 5 minutes later, sirens. 2 officers stepped out, one tall and calm, the other already annoyed. "All right," the tall one said. "What's going on here?" Margaret jumped in before I could speak. "Officer, this man broke into this home. It belongs to the Maple Ridge HOA. I'm the president. I have full authority to secure it." "Secure it," I said. "She's literally changing my locks." I held up the deed, my ID, and the county boundary map. The taller cop looked at the paperwork, then back at Margaret. "Ma'am, do you have any documents showing HOA ownership of this property?" She hesitated. "Not on me," she said slowly, "but it's common knowledge. Everyone here knows this lot belongs to the association." The officer sighed. "That's not how property law works." Her voice cracked. "You don't understand. He's going to bring down property values. Look at those curtains. That fence color violates HOA standards." He blinked. "Ma'am, this house isn't in your HOA." You could feel the silence drop like thunder. Neighbors peeked through windows. The locksmith stopped mid-screw. Margaret's smile twitched. "You don't have jurisdiction here," she whispered. "Neither do you," the cop said firmly. "Now open that door." As the tension thickened, Margaret's husband jogged over, red, faced and embarrassed. "Honey, maybe we should just know," she snapped. "He's lying. I saw the boundary map once. Years ago, it included this house. But the cop wasn't buying it." He gestured to the locksmith. "Sir, step away from the door." The locksmith dropped his screwdriver and backed off. Margaret turned to me, pointing a trembling finger. "You'll regret this. You have no idea who you're dealing with." I smiled. "Oh, I think I do. You're the lady who just changed locks on a cop's property." Her jaw dropped. The officer smirked slightly. "Wait, you're law enforcement." "Former," I said. "County detective, retired last year." Margaret went pale. "This isn't over," she hissed. "I'll have you arrested by the HOA board." "Good luck," I said. "Because starting now, every second of this is on camera." The officers left after documenting everything, but the damage was done. I had to call my own locksmith just to get into my home again. The HOA president had crossed a line, and I wasn't about to let it slide. That night, I filed a police report, sent copies to the county, and uploaded my footage to a legal channel I used to follow. Within hours, the comments exploded. People couldn't believe what they saw. By morning, reporters were calling. By noon, the HOA board was in chaos. And by sunset, Margaret was facing her worst nightmare. The police were back, this time for her. The next morning, my phone buzzed nonstop. Messages, missed calls. Even the county clerk's office had left me a voicemail. Sir, we received your report. You're not the first to complain about Mrs. Fuller. We'll be taking this seriously. But that was just the beginning. By noon, 2 sheriff's deputies showed up at her door, the same officers from yesterday. They had questions, they had evidence, and they had a warrant. Margaret had no idea I was standing just down the block, filming quietly as the patrol car pulled into her driveway. She came out in her robe, yelling before they even stepped onto her porch. Why are you here again? I already told you. He's trespassing. The taller officer, the same calm one from before, held up a document. Ma'am, we have a warrant to investigate an illegal lock change and property interference. Please stand back. Illegal, she scoffed. That's my HOA property. I was just protecting it from criminals. He gave a dry smile. Then, I guess we'll see if the county assessor agrees with you. When they said county, her face flickered the first real sign of fear. The shorter deputy, a younger guy with a camera on his vest, walked up to my porch. You said she changed your locks yesterday. Yes, sir. I said, holding up the footage on my phone. Got it all right here. He nodded. We'll need a copy of that. The DA office will love this. Neighbors began stepping outside, phones ready. The HOA Iron Lady was finally being questioned by the same cops she'd called. Margaret's voice shook. You can't record this. This is private HOA business. The officer turned to her calmly. Ma'am, this is an open investigation. You made it public when you involved law enforcement. Then came the moment I'd been waiting for. The officer pointed to my front door. Unlock it. She froze. Excuse me. You changed the lock. You're going to unlock it in front of everyone. You could feel the crowd's anticipation. Every neighbor held up their phone. Her hand trembled as she reached into her bag. The sound of keys jingling was louder than the wind. The officer stood firm. Go ahead. Unlock the door. Click. The deadbolt turned. The door creaked open, and the moment it did, the officer said, loud enough for the whole block to hear, Ma'am, you just admitted to tampering with private property. Her husband, standing behind her, muttered, Margaret, maybe it's time we stop. She snapped back, no, he's lying. He's manipulating the system. But the officer wasn't done. He showed her a printed copy of the county property boundary map, the one I'd submitted. See this line? Everything on this side your HOA. This side his property. That's a 40-foot difference. You had no right to interfere. Her lips quivered. That can't be right. I've lived here for 20 years, and yet. The officer interrupted. You never bothered to check the zoning lines. At that moment, the locksmith, the same one she hired, arrived again, confused, holding an invoice. Ma'am, I need payment for yesterday's service. Her face went red. Not now. Actually, the officer said, go ahead and give him the bill. We'll attach it to the evidence record. The locksmith looked at me. Sorry, man, I didn't know. No problem. I said, smiling. You were just doing your job. The officer turned back to Margaret. Ma'am, you're under investigation for unlawful entry, property interference, and harassment. You'll receive a summons. The neighborhood gasped. Margaret screamed, this is harassment. I am the law here. The officer shook his head. No, ma'am. The law is standing right in front of you. She tried to storm back inside her house, but the deputies stopped her. One of them read her the county citation notice right there on the sidewalk while neighbors whispered, filmed, and smiled behind their curtains. When it was over, I finally stepped closer, calm but unflinching. Next time, try knocking instead of changing locks. She glared at me, her voice trembling with rage. "You'll regret this, maybe," I said, "but at least I'll do it behind my own door." By that evening, clips from the incident were all over social media. The title on one viral video read, "HOA President Forced to Unlock House She Tried to Steal." It hit 500,000 views overnight. The HOA board called an emergency meeting not to defend her, but to remove her. But she wasn't done. 2 days later, a letter showed up in my mailbox, a lawsuit. She was suing me for emotional distress, property confusion, and defamation. That's when I knew this wasn't over yet. Because next came court, and the part where the entire neighborhood would learn exactly who Margaret Fuller really was. 2 weeks later, a gray morning, rain drizzled across the courthouse steps as I walked up, briefcase in hand. This wasn't just about my house anymore. This was about every person she'd bullied, fined, or humiliated under the fake banner of HOA authority. And I wasn't walking in alone. Behind me were 6 of my neighbors, the same ones who'd once feared her. They stood tall, quiet, ready to testify. Inside, the courtroom buzzed. Reporters, HOA members, even a few county officials filled the benches. The sound of whispered gossip was thicker than the rain outside. Then the doors opened and Margaret Fuller marched in. Pink suit, pearls, clipboard, still acting like she was walking into a board meeting, not a legal hearing. She didn't glance at me, just sat beside her lawyer, chin raised high. Her attorney, a smug man with slicked back hair, whispered something that made her smirk. I just smiled, because today I wasn't the one on the defensive. The judge entered. A heavy silence fell. Court is now in session for Fuller vs. Sanders. Margaret leaned back, confident. She believed this was her domain. She believed she could twist the truth one more time. Her lawyer stood first. "Your Honor, my client has endured emotional distress and harassment due to the defendant's actions. He moved into a restricted property and continues to defame the Homeowners Association." The judge frowned. "Restricted by who?" "By the HOA, Your Honor." "Which HOA?" the judge asked flatly. The lawyer cleared his throat. "The Lakeside Estates HOA, Your Honor." "Is the defendant's property part of Lakeside Estates?" The silence that followed could have been cut with a knife. Margaret blinked. The lawyer shuffled his papers. "Well, it borders the community," and the judge leaned forward. "Answer the question." "Technically, no, Your Honor." The judge sighed. "Then this entire lawsuit is invalid." Gasps erupted from the benches. Reporters scribbled furiously. Margaret's face drained of color, but it wasn't over, not yet. My lawyer stood, calm, composed, like he'd been waiting for this moment all week. "Your Honor, if I may, I have additional exhibits for the court." He handed the clerk a folder. Inside were high-resolution maps, property deeds, timestamps, video evidence, all showing one simple truth. My land was outside their jurisdiction, and then came the knockout blow. He pulled out a document, a rental agreement. "This," he said, holding it up, "is a lease signed by Mrs. Fuller herself. She's been renting a small lakeside office from my client for over 2 years." The courtroom erupted. Even the judge's eyebrows shot up. "Wait," the judge said, "you're her landlord?" I nodded. "Yes, Your Honor, and I have records of every payment." Margaret's face turned pale as her lawyer dropped his pen. The judge's gavel hit the bench sharply. "Mrs. Fuller, is this true?" She stammered, voice trembling. It's a misunderstanding." "I didn't realize," the judge interrupted. "You sued your own landlord for violating HOA rules on property he owns." The courtroom broke into a low murmur of disbelief. Cameras clicked. The judge leaned back, sighing heavily. "Mrs. Fuller, this is not a misunderstanding. It's harassment, misuse of HOA power, and potentially fraud. Consider yourself lucky this is civil court." My lawyer slid over one final folder. Insurance fraud reports, financial documents, photos showing her approving HOA maintenance payments to companies registered in her husband's name. The judge's tone hardened. "Mrs. Fuller, do you realize what these documents imply?" She froze. "Your Honor, they imply embezzlement." The silence was electric. You could almost hear the air leave her lungs. The judge looked toward the deputies standing by the door. "Bailiffs, please escort Mrs. Fuller to the side room." She'll be detained for questioning. Her lawyer tried to protest, but she was already trembling, eyes glassy, pearls shaking around her neck. You can't do this to me. I run this community. The judge slammed the gavel. Not anymore, you don't. The deputies took her by the arms and led her out. I just sat there, quiet, no smile, no anger, just calm. Justice finally had arrived. Later that evening, the neighborhood felt different, peaceful. For the first time in years, people were outside chatting, walking their dogs, waving across fences. The HOA board had been dissolved pending investigation. The sheriff's office had opened a probe into their finances, and my farmhouse, my quiet dream home, stood free. As the sun dipped behind the trees, the last rays of light hit the windows. I stood on my porch, watching the breeze ripple through the grass. My neighbor, the one who'd once been too scared to wave, called out from across the road. Looks like you finally changed more than the locks, huh? I laughed softly. Guess so, he grinned. You changed the whole neighborhood. Sometimes the locks you change aren't just on doors. They're on the people who think they own others. And when the truth finally walks in, no HOA rule, no threat, no scream can keep it out. Justice doesn't knock twice. It just turns the key, because in the end, you can't lock out what's right. And now go, rule it.